Okay, so we're going to start today with exercise 226, and today will be your first night rendering. And so this is building upon what we've been doing. The important thing to recognize is that as we move forward, you're going to do more and more rendering time and less actual modeling. So the hope is that the bulk of what you've set up is already done. Now it's a matter of going through settings and tweaking things and making it look right. I do have the rendering that I started last class. I let it run this morning with my two lights in it. This was the daytime rendering just for comparison purposes so you could see how it turned out. I bumped up the size quite a bit. This took maybe 2 hours this morning to render, so it does take time. All the computers in this lab have their own Q drives so they won't conflict with anything else. So if you manually type in ET103-1 through ET103-32 or 33 or something like that, all of those servers are good to go for the network render. And I would encourage you to type them all in. Certainly when we're sitting in class like this, there's plenty of empty computers. We might as well use them. It's not a bad idea to, if you're coming into the lab on a day that I'm not here, to go around and take a look at the computers that are on. Have they been restarted recently? Do they have the little network rendering icon that's up, which I don't even think it is up on my computer right now. Important to make sure that those are actually running so that you can harness those. It's going to be really important as you go forward because there's lots and lots of those. There's the distributed rendering. Shows up as this little icon here. Just make sure that's running in the taskbar so that multiple computers out there have it. Okay, so last class I talked a little bit about those channels. You remember that I turned on the VFB channels for alpha and background and what have you. Since this did finish rendering, I want to point out how you save those channels. The channels are available here in these little drop downs. So what you're seeing right now is the RGB color. Okay, if I switch to alpha, we're going to get basically what is background. And since I'm looking through these windows, the only background in my scene is those black areas, right? If you've taken 135, you remember that this looks an awful lot like a mask in Photoshop, and you can use this as a mask in Photoshop. So it's really useful. That's the alpha channel. The Z depth doesn't show much because this isn't an exterior rendering, but it basically has to do with what things are very close to the camera, what things are further away. Because there's glass in the windows, it's reading as close to the camera. That's why we're not getting really anything out of the Z depth. And the background will render just the background, but again, I'm inside the building, so the glass is masking it. So it's probably not the best example, but you do see the alpha as an example. This does not add any extra load to the rendering. It does it anyway, so it's easy to add those channels down the road. The one I'll do today, I'll turn on some of the other options so we can see some more of those. If you're going to save those, right, you'll see that the normal save button that you've been using is here. Right next to it, there's a save with about 4 or 5 disks in a row. That will save all the channels at once. So we'll go ahead and click on that now, and I would start doing that as your default. And let me go to 136, and today will be 226. Right? And we'll go ahead and save these. This is interior render day 01. And when I click save, it will save all the channels. So if I go to my flash drive and we look at that folder, right, there's my alpha, background, and Z depth. So it's saving all of those for me. Okay, so it's really easy to do. Just get in the habit of doing it down the road. I'm going to turn on material ID and probably reflection before we do the next rendering. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, but I wanted to point that out to you so that you can see it. I'll post this so you can have a look at this and see how it's turning out. I'm going to go ahead and close this for now, and we're going to go back to my scene. Okay, so I've already put these two lights in, but we're going to talk about converting this into a nighttime rendering, okay, which is the purpose today. We're going to do an interior night rendering today. Next class we'll do an exterior nighttime rendering. So you kind of see the trajectory. The more lights and stuff you put in now, the better it's going to be down the road. So all of this snowballs, right? You do work now, it makes less work down the road later on. Okay, so first thing that I want to do is I'm going to open my V-Ray options, and we're going to start to get really picky about how we're saving our current set of options. So right now I just did a interior day rendering. Okay, I want to save the exact V-Ray settings for this past render because I was fairly happy with the results. So I'm going to click on this save icon, and again this is in the V-Ray options editor. And I'm going to go to my flash drive, and we'll go into my 226 folder, and I'm going to call this render day interior 01, and this will then save all of the settings in V-Ray that I currently have as my interior render. The idea here is that if I want to go back and render this render again, right, I don't have to do anything other than click on this load button, get my render day interior, click on it, it'll load those settings back in. Right? Now that I've saved that, I'm going to start to modify the settings for the nighttime render. Okay? So we have a variety of options. You remember before when we did our first kind of introduction to lighting, we loaded in that basic night scene, right? The basic night scene doesn't have any kind of an HDRI background. It has no starlight. Basically, it's a really dark, smoky background as I created it to use it. We could use that in this scenario, or we can put in a nighttime HDRI environment that has a moon and stars and that sort of thing. So on the website, under Exercise 226, there is a night HDRI. It is also available on the Q drive, so you don't have to download it from here, but I wanted to point out that it is available for you. We're going to go back to my scene, and I'm going to go to Environment, and then I'm going to click on the GI skylight and also the GI reflection. Now, to kind of illustrate the difference between these two, I don't think I did a particularly good job before of explaining these. There are two things that make up our environment inside V-Ray. There is what's called the GI skylight, and there's also the background. Okay? And these two act independent of one another. The GI skylight is the kind of global illumination that's happening independent of the sun. So if we took today as an example, right, there is a sun. It happens to be covered up by clouds, right? But then there's a lot of environmental factors, i.e. the clouds and the rain, that are reflecting and refracting light and giving us a little bit of global illumination, right? If this didn't exist, if we walked outside, the shadow that we would cast would be completely stark black, and we wouldn't be able to see anything inside the shadow, right? It would be just black. Have you guys ever, some of you probably have, been up on like a stage in theater or whatever, and there's a spotlight shining on you or on a person, right? It's a very bright light. Around you is very dark. There's no global illumination, and the shadow that you would cast is basically black, right? The only way you'd change that is if you had some lighting that would be somewhere else on the stage that would be lighting up what the shadow was. Okay? This global illumination is all the bounced reflected light that's in the scene. So it's important to have that. Okay? The background here is just what the background looks like. Right? Is it blue sky, or tonight is it going to be a night sky with a moon in it? Right? It's just what it looks like. It's not the actual light itself. So that's why we have to edit both of these values. So I'm going to go ahead and go to GI Skylight. I'm going to click on the little M, and instead of having my cloudy HDR, I'm going to go to my Q drive with my resources. I'm going to go to Night HDRI, and I'm going to pick the Moonlit 3 GI. Okay? And there's a slight difference between these two files. The GI is a blurred version of the primary one. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Now I know it looks like it's bright blue. It's not really this bright blue, right? We'll go ahead and say OK. And I'll say OK here as well. Then I'm going to go to the background. I'm going to click on my map, and I'm going to change it again to the Q drive, and I'm going to go to it's just resources. I don't know why there's two folders. And HDRI, Night HDRI, and Moonlit 3. That's what I'm going to pick. I'll go ahead and say OK, and then OK. So I have those two backgrounds set up. Okay. Now, generally speaking, if you want the environment to be darker outside, this value is going to be 1 or lower, right? Generally, you're not going to beef up the amount of ambient light, right? Usually, you want to reduce it. You want it to be lower. So I'm going to leave it at 0.5. The background for right now, I'll leave at 1.0. And we may have to adjust this a little bit. Okay. Now, the next part of this is that inside my scene, right, I also have a sun that's been shining. Okay? If I turn the sun on, it's not going to be a nighttime rendering. So I have to turn the sun off. So the hope being, when you created the sun to begin with, the sun was put on a layer such that you can just turn the sun off. Right? In this case, the sun's off. I don't have to worry about it anymore. I can confirm, if I do select light, I can say 1 point light, 1 spotlight added to the selection. Those are my 2 lights. I do not have the directional light. If the sun was on and I said select light, one directional light, 1 point light, 1 spotlight. So I have confirmation that the sun is actually off, which is what I wanted it to do. You can select the sun, modify it, and drastically reduce the value of the sun, though I find it better to just turn it off completely. And it's easier than modifying the sun. Okay. So I've done that. I have that part of it set up. Let me go back into my options here. We're going to confirm a few things. Under my system, I have distributed rendering on. I'm going to look at my hosts. Right? There they are. The list goes from all the way up to 32. They're all checked. I'm going to resolve my servers to make sure I have all the servers, and I'll say OK. So those are ready to go. Right? The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to my indirect illumination, or my GI tab. All right, reload that. Sorry, I just want to make sure. Okay, good. And I'm going to change my secondary engine to be light cache, which I already had it set up. The default is brute force, right? Light cache is a little bit faster, a little bit less accurate, but when we're doing a nighttime render, that's okay. Okay, so I've converted that to light cache, so that's good. I'm going to go to my output, and right now I had a pretty big output for my last rendering. Because I'm not sure what it's going to turn out like, I'm going to go with a much smaller rendering, right? And so that's fine. We'll go ahead and close that. All right. And the global switches, let me turn on global switches. A couple things that I want to make sure, right? I want to make sure that shadows are cast and that this hidden lights is not checked. Right? Because I turned my sun off and I want to make sure that it stays off. So if I were to check this, it would turn the sun back on. Don't want that. So that's good. That setting is well done. Okay, so all of these settings seem pretty good. Right? Before I move on, I'm going to go ahead and save these settings as a practice. Right? So this is going to be a render, if I can type, which clearly I can't. Night, interior, right? And I'm going to do 01-test. So that this is a test setting, but I can always come back to this if I want to. So go ahead and click save. Right? And at this point, I may add a few more lights and make this look a little bit better. You don't have to watch me add more lights. It's not worth it. But I'm going to go ahead and turn on, or let the render go, and let's take a look at what happens. Okay, we have to be patient here for a second. One of the nice things about a light cache is you can see these little dots starting to appear. It builds up, so you can see rather quickly what the lighting conditions are looking like. So it's a good way of kind of quickly previewing what's happening. And so, for example, right now, I can see my light, but I can also see that there's a dark patch where the window would be. That would be what I'm after. So it's starting to turn out the way I want. Furthermore, I have no lights over on this side in the stairs yet. So everything's pretty dark in the stairs. So that's something I'm going to change. I'm going to add some lighting and that sort of thing. But this is a good way of kind of quickly testing how your image is coming together. So while that's rendering, I'm going to point out something else, and that is that under the tutorials and under V-Ray, at the very beginning here, there's the ultimate V-Ray guide, including troubleshooting, right? You will get to the point in the semester, if you're not there already, where you're going to be working on some of your own renderings, and I won't be here. And you'll be like, wait, it's not working, it's taking forever. This is very much a work in progress. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm trying very hard to put together a list of, here are the things you should check first if it's not rendering. And so I wanted to point that out, that this exists. And so I've got some VisOpt files that you can load that can help, and I've got notes about what things to change as you're going through. I need to improve the night rendering notes. I will work on that. I have, if your image is too dark, what to do. If your image is too light, what to do, that sort of thing. So I'm trying to give you some of that if I'm not here. Right. When I'm here, however, I recognize that there's a bunch of tweaking that's going to happen, and you should ask me to come over and we'll try to work through what the settings are. Unfortunately, V-Ray has so many settings that it's hard for me to just say, oh, it's always this one setting. And we have to sometimes pay attention and try to reverse engineer what's happening. So I've let this run. It's 50% of the way through the light cache. I'm seeing that I like the results thus far. I can see a little bit more than you can in terms of my light and what's happening. I see that my outside is black, which is what I was after. If I put some lights on the outside, I'd see through my windows, which would be beneficial, but obviously I haven't done that yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this rendering for right now. I'm going to turn you guys loose to start setting up your interior rendering as well. And I'm going to, meanwhile, start to add some more lights to my scene so that we can kind of see what it looks like, and then I'll do another rendering and you can see it a little bit further down the road. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. What I told you I was going to do and I didn't is I'm going to go back to my VFB channels, and I have RGB color and alpha, but I'm going to add a few more. I'm going to add the reflection channel, and I'm going to add the material ID channel and the render ID channel. Okay, so just a couple more to my list. Again, there's no harm in having a few more channels. It doesn't take any more rendering time. So it can be useful down the road. So I added a couple more there, right? So it's RGB color, alpha, reflection, render ID, material ID, and Z-depth. Right? So I have those on, right? And then I'm going to play around with a few more things. One of the things that I want in this scene is I want inside of these stairs here, I want there to be a little bit of a light at the edge of these stairs that shines down onto the stair below. I want to tuck a light up underneath. So instead of using a point light or a spotlight, I'm going to use a rectangular light. Rectangular lights are harder to adjust and get them to do what you want them to do, but at the same time they can be useful. So I wanted to walk through kind of how I'm going to create that rectangular light. The rectangular light is here, and when I click on it, it's going to say rectangular light corner, right? So we'll start on one of these stairs. Let me see if we can't get to the first stair here. Right, we'll do something like this. Let me go into an X-ray mode. Ooh, definitely not. How about a ghosted mode? There we go. And we're going to go from this corner right to that corner. Oh, whoops. Sorry. Do it one more time. Start right there. I was creating it as a box rather than. There we go. Okay, and you see that I have the light now. If I can select it here. They can be very tricky to select. There we go, I got it. But you see that the light is pointing up rather than down. I want it to be pointing down. So I'm going to type flip, and it's going to point down instead. And I'm also, right now it's coplanar with the bottom surface of the light. I want it to be slightly below. So I'm going to move vertically, and we'll go like 1/8 of an inch. So negative 0.125 inches, just slightly below. Okay. Then I'll come over to my properties, go to my light, and now I have to make the same adjustments that we've been making. So we're going to go with a wattage. We'll start with the 30 watt. I'll change my color to be 255, 214, 170. If I can type, there we go. I'll say okay, so that's done. One of the things about a rectangular light is you can choose to make it visible or not visible. I always make it invisible. I don't want it to be double-sided. I want it to be just shining down in the direction of the arrow, so I'm not going to check that box. The rest of this is fine, so we'll go ahead and be okay with that. Now, I do want it to be on its own layer or sublayer in lighting. So let me go to lighting, let me add a sublayer, and we'll call this stair light. Which is there, and I'm going to change my object layer so that I can then control this by that stair layer. And the advantage here is I can select the objects that are on that layer and work with all of these lights as one. So now that I've created the first one here, right, it doesn't hurt to do a quick render to make sure that this is actually shining. So I'll go ahead and do a quick render. It's a light cache, so it's a quick test. If I get any light out of it, chances are it's going to work. But like I said, and like you guys have uncovered already, sometimes you get a bad light. And so I'd rather not copy and paste this a million times and then realize it's a bad light. So we have to give it just a second. Okay, so I can see right here in the corner I'm starting to get light cast from that, so that's enough for me to know that I'm getting the light cast. I can move on. So I'll go ahead and close that, and I'll close this. Now I'm going to copy this for each of the stairs. So I'll just do a copy. I'll pick this as a base point, and then we'll just drop it for every one of the stairs on the way up. Let me turn off center because I keep snapping with the wrong thing here. There we go.
So your stairs are now going to glow?
The bottoms of the stairs. So it would be as if I tucked a light fixture under the stair, right? And so I could copy those onto the lower stairs, which I may do in a second. But let's take a quick look at this view and see. And again, these are all test renders. Ultimately, I'm going to set up a nice view that includes these stairs so I can see what they look like. But we'll have a look and see how the light shines. And a lot of the light's going to shine down to the floor, obviously, but a little bit should spill out onto the stair as they stack. And we'll take a look and see what happens. So you'll find when you start to do this interior night rendering, much more than the day rendering, that you're going to need a lot more light. And that's going to help the overall look. If you think about your house, chances are you have multiple light sources in a particular room. You might have can lights in the ceiling, you might have lamps on the side tables, you might have under counter lights in the kitchen. All of those really combine to make a good quality image. So it appears that from its early stages, and I know you can't see as much, that yes, I am getting the lighting on the stairs that I was after. If I let this run a little bit longer, we could see it. But I'm also noticing that from this vantage point, I don't have any lights upstairs in the room. that it's going to, so I've got a dark void there. So I need to add lights to that room. And so it's kind of a snowball effect where we have to keep adjusting and adding a few more lights and doing these quick little test renders to see, is it doing what I want it to do? Am I seeing what I want to see? Okay? So I'm going to turn you loose to do this. I will continue to work on this a little bit and add a few more lights so you can see what they look like. And then we'll do a higher quality rendering at the end. All right? Any questions before I let you go? No? Okay.